Do I look good? Okay. So, should you outsource your social media? Well, the foundation to this question is essentially, do I have time to do social media in the first place? So if you're asking yourself, do you have time for social media? And you may not even be asking yourself that question like cognitively. You may be saying, at the end of the day, I just forgot to post on Twitter, or, I don't have time to mess around with Instagram, or, there's too much to maintain. Let me just give it to a 17-year-old. But if you're thinking about social media as purely a way to, reach more people, you're probably thinking about it the wrong way. Social media is instead the way we communicate. The way. This is how we communicate. This is how we talk. This is the telephone. Social media has replaced the telephone. Can we do confession for a second? There is a growing segment of people who get upset when their phone rings. 70% of the phone calls I get could have been solved over text message. For all practical purposes, it is how we communicate. It's how I know what's going on in your life. So all of the things that happen when we say, hello, hey, how are you? Hey, I'm good. How's your mom doing? Oh, she's doing all right. Hey, did you see that game yesterday? Man, I sure did. How about this weather? Whoa, that was 3 minutes of, what's the point? So you talked for 4 minutes and you forgot why you called. But I'm not the only one. There's a generation of people who the only way they communicate with the outside world is with their thumbs. But the question is, do you have time for social media? You have to make time for social media. And I think that's even a backwards way to look at it, because social media should be managing your online presence. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and etc. should be part of your day. If it disrupts your day, then you're probably doing it wrong. You're probably showing things that the audience doesn't want to see anyway. It should follow along. It should be, the candid camera that just walks kind of alongside you. It should be the conversation that happens. Here's a great way to look at it. Prayer without ceasing, right? So the sweet hour of prayer is great, but there should be a constant conversation going on with God. So while you wake up at 6 a.m. and you spend 20 minutes or an hour on your knees, that's fantastic, and you're praying, and, bravo. But this 24-hour-a-day conversation with God is what really makes that difference. It's when you're consulting him all day long, not even audibly, God, what do you think about this deal? Or, God, what do you think? Should I make this left turn or this right? Or, God, how should I respond? So it's this ongoing conversation. It's prayer without ceasing. So think of social media not as, the hour a day I set aside to engage online. It's a constant conversation that just happens, and it's casual and it's lighthearted. So is delegating your social media to somebody else who has all the time in the world to sit on Twitter a bad thing? I don't think it is a bad thing. I think what's most important is that you do engage. And when you get into trouble with delegating social media, particularly things like Twitter, where it's instantaneous and it's all that, you got to respond. What's problematic about that is most people, what they'll do is they'll just take quotes from your sermon, or they'll just take quotes, as you said, and put them out there in the world. And what works on Twitter is when it's a dialogue, when people respond to you and you can provide feedback back to them. So that person who isn't you, while you've delegated them this authority to manage your Twitter account, they can't necessarily respond back to people who are tweeting back at you. Their job was to put up quotes. Their job was to take snippets of your message and post it. But if the people who are reading your messages on Twitter want to ask you a question or want to go deeper or want to just engage in a dialogue or want to, just talk a little bit more in depth about a subject, it's more difficult for that person who's under delegated authority to be able to be you. But if you have to delegate it, I understand. And there are ways to get around, having to be on, constantly all the time and versus just not having a presence. In that sense, what you do is you set aside time. So you can do things like ask me anything. So you can let people know that on Friday night between 8 and 10 p.m., you're going to be live on Twitter, talking, answering questions. So while you may be peppering out messages all week long, you just let people know every several hours on Twitter, or at least once a day on Twitter, you're posting a tweet saying, hey, from Friday night, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., I'm going to be sitting here live purely to talk to you. If you do that, then the level of engagement you'll get from people who really want to hear you and really want to, talk to the real you will be a lot higher. They'll respect you more. They'll have deeper relationships built over social media virtually. These can really be built virtually because they get to talk to the real you and they get a real response, not just, an advertisement by a quote or, just something that somebody heard you say or a retweet. They want to talk to a person. Isolate an hour, half an hour a week. Say, hey, I'm going to be live at this specific time, whatever time works for you. You find your audience, just play with different times so you can realize, when your audience is, when you get into the highest level of engagement. So play with that time. And once you find it, you'll know, if you can set aside 20 minutes, half an hour, 2 hours a week, and just talk to your audience, let them know that you'll be here and that you'll be answering questions. You'll be in real conversations with people. You get a whole lot more out of that than you would if you just outsourced it to somebody who really couldn't speak for you, couldn't speak in your voice.